Welcome to the entrustED podcast. You know, sometimes leadership is difficult. At times, you feel like you're on a lonely island, and depending on the situation, you may even have to have difficult talks with your team. So whether it's rallying the troops for a struggle that lies ahead, or perhaps performance and professionalism from some employees just isn't happening, you may even need to have a conversation parting ways with someone who fears the change, like losing employment, or going on a leave of absence, or taking a detour on their career trajectory. I think it's a well-known fact that if you ask people what they would say the most important thing to them in their life is, most people would say it's their family. But the second thing a lot would say is it's their job. So whatever the situation is, those conversations require courage. And as my grandkids often say, it gets awkward. So today's episode is all about courageous conversations. That's why our guest today was chosen for this episode, and we are in for a real treat. I want to introduce you to Claudette Trujillo Federico, who has been a leader in education for 25 years. She is currently the principal of Metropolitan Arts Academy in the Denver metropolitan area. Claudette is a visionary leader. She's a published poet and author, among other things, and she's also a national speaker and trainer in competency-based education. And Claudette champions personalized education for all children. Claudette has deep roots in Colorado. She's a proud parent, a grandparent, and a very active community member, and she is married to and supported by her amazing husband, Chris Federico. So help me welcome the incomparable Claudette.
Hi, Pam. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming. And I know we talked a little bit about the title for the episode, and it's one that can make people feel scratchy, I think.
Absolutely.
You know, especially when you're talking to people you also have relationships with, but maybe there's something that has to be addressed. And so, first of all, I just want to ask you, do you believe that courageous conversations are important and knowing how to navigate those for effective leadership?
I think they're crucial, especially in the work we're doing in education, right? When we're focused on continuous improvement, there's always an opportunity for a courageous conversation, whether that's to bring out the best in somebody or to help guide them to a better place and feeling more confident in what they're doing. So there's always those opportunities, and I think they're really fundamental to the work that we do.
Yeah, we're going to talk about a couple of those things you just mentioned. What courageous conversations, or how have courageous conversations affected your leadership journey?
Well, I'll tell you this, I'm not a 21-year-old getting crazy anymore. I've had to button some things up. I've had some great courageous conversations with some mentors and leaders in my life that I think have shaped me to realize you could still be your authentic self, but it was really about holding down your integrity. And, you mentioned at the beginning, what are some things that are important to people? And family absolutely is one. I also agree that your job is second, but I think really what is at the surface or the most important part of that is integrity. And so I always looked at those courageous conversations when they were happening with me about how does this affect my integrity, and how does this help me to be better? And in the spirit of knowing the people that were sharing those conversations, it wasn't easy for them, but they had my best interest at heart.
What impact, though, do you think maybe some of these conversations had on either team dynamics, group dynamics, or culture?
Well, I think I'd like to bring up an example for you. So one example I have is when our school was in turnaround. We were in a tough place at that time, and I had a courageous conversation with you where you had to tell me, basically, take the reins. This is your school. You need to step up your leadership and lead your teams into a place where we're safe, essentially. And that was a big turning point for my staff. And to go back and lead that conversation with my staff was, I looked at it like an investment in them. And they needed to see that coming from that same good space and good place, putting the children first. That was the biggest priority.
Well, you mentioned turnaround.
Mm-hmm.
So for people who may not be from Colorado, Can you explain really what that is?
Right. So in Colorado, we have one state assessment that students take at one point in the year, and the measurement of a school is based upon that one assessment, one point in the year. And schools often find themselves not doing so well on that one day, and that becomes an opening for lots of people to kind of come into your space and decide what's done with your school and how it's done with your school. It can be a very scary time. And depending on how you frame that with your staff, you can see staff leave. You can see enrollment be affected. So it's important at that time. I think leadership is more important than ever.
How have courageous conversations affected your leadership journey?
They've helped me to obviously be a better leader, a stronger leader, to lead my team with more confidence. But I think mostly they've helped me be reflective on my own journey and what I decide to commit to.
Have you had any lessons from past courageous conversations that didn't go as planned?
Yes. I had a conversation with a mentor years back who really helped me to try to rein some things in myself. And it was a difficult conversation. I think when you're in the public eye, there can sometimes be perception or judgment. And those things are hard to hear if they're who you think you are or how you embody yourself. And I had to really reflect on those. They didn't go well initially with me. As I've gotten older, I find myself almost regurgitating those same things back to others now, just to help them to remain their authentic self, but also to push through and be able to make the impact that they really want to make.
I had someone tell me one time that you never have to beat your thoroughbreds because they're hardest on themselves. Yeah. And I know you're a passionate person. You take everything to heart that has to do with your career, your journey, your kids that you're trying to impact and influence. So how do you prepare yourself mentally and emotionally for tough conversations?
I think it's really about the gut check. I think I always look at it from the perception of how would I want someone to approach that with me? How can I meet that person where they are with the integrity that I want to bring, but the honesty? Sometimes those conversations are very difficult to navigate. Watching how they respond and almost preparing them for that, giving them kind of an intro to why we're going this. I think people go this direction. I think people need to know the why behind it so they don't feel like it's a personal attack or an attack on their professionalism.
Have you had a conversation, a courageous one, that didn't go well? What did that look like? What did you learn? Give me an example.
I think it went back to the person's ability to be able to reflect and own it. Not everybody's ready for that. You may be ready for the courageous conversation as the leader, but it doesn't mean that the person on the receiving end is ready to hear it. And so there's been times where people have been escorted out of my office. There have been times when people stormed off and slammed the door. One thing I learned is with you as my mentor, I was that person a lot of times with you. I would throw my own.
No.
Yeah. You probably don't remember because I've been through finishing school, but there's been times where emotionally I couldn't handle that conversation and it never rattled you. And so sometimes it kind of surprised me because I would get really you would have your famous things you would say okay, you need time, you're upset. And you would be ready for me to re-engage in that conversation when I was ready. You didn't continue to push. And so there's been times, whether it's the person receiving it or myself, where there's that big emotional space and it hasn't gone well. And I had to take a step back and they would walk out and, the person in me, the person, not the professional, would want to chase after them and say, we're having this conversation now and you need to hear this. But the professional in me needed to respect that they weren't ready to have it. And it wasn't going to be received in something that could help them grow, whether that would be grow into another space, another place, or grow into what we needed at the time at our school. And so some of those have not gone well. And it was really about allowing myself to take the space and not feel I had to control the outcome, right? You can give this feedback, have this courageous conversation, but the power really lies in the person receiving it. And if they're ready to have it, and if they're ready and open, and not everyone's going to meet you there when you're ready to give it. And so through those things, I've had to take a little bit more time in navigating them.
Oh, I think that's very honest. And I think all of us have, feelings, especially when we invest ourselves in what we believe in and care about. And sometimes those thoughts are divergent with someone else, right?
Yeah.
And so that's when maybe some conflict comes around. So here's what I'll say to that. It seems to me the natural instinct for people is to avoid conflict. But there are so many ways to handle conflict. Do you have any specific way you believe you handle conflict better than maybe another way of just avoidance?
Yeah, I think I have to be direct about it. I can't sit with something because it makes me feel like I'm being inauthentic. If there is something brewing or something that needs to be addressed, I want to clear that out of the way because I see it as an obstacle to a professional working
like the
relationship.
Elephant in the room.
Yeah. So one example I had recently is one of my absolute best teachers. She got super excited about this project she was working on, and she said, "I need this feedback and I need it right away because I've got a deadline." She puts a lot of pressure on herself, high personal accountability, and she sent it to me, and I sent some edits back. Okay, these are the things I feel need to be edited. And she's like, "Well, I don't have time to do all of those edits." And I said, "Well, here I am on a Sunday giving you all of those edits. Why are you asking if you're not going to make the changes? I have other things I need to do." And her response was, "Well, you didn't even say anything was good."
Oh.
And I said, "Well, you didn't even thank me for editing on a Sunday." And what I found was the two of us were both not feeling valued in that moment, right? And so it could have turned into this big conflict if we didn't talk about it, that we both would have just been, there was a huge miss. And she was feeling like, I'm doing this project, and what I needed from you was like, amazing. Thanks for doing it. Thanks for getting it to me. It looks great. A few minor things you may want to consider. She really needed that approach from me. And I was looking at it more of a checklist of, you're on a tight deadline. You need this back right away. I'm just going to give you the meat and potatoes. This is how it needs to go. And so I think we had a really great conversation after about, hey, we both hate to be in conflict with each other, but we do a really great job of sitting down and having a conversation to say, I wasn't feeling valued. And I respect you enough that I need you to value me in that situation before I'm able to take that personal feedback.
A really great leader, and I'm going to paraphrase now, said, if you want to do something really good for somebody, find one thing that you can admire about them and tell them and lift them up. And I believe that too, because we talk about playing to your strengths and things like that, but if you can find that one thing, and sometimes that's hard to do when you're facing a courageous conversation, but it goes just a long way because I think it helps people feel seen.
I totally agree. And a few years back, I started a thing every November. I know that's the month of gratitude. So it's a good reminder for me, not that we shouldn't do it outside of November, but it's a good reminder for me. Annually, I send a text message to every employee. And it's very personalized, and it's not one is the same. Everyone has to be unique, and it's really looking for that one thing. How do they contribute to the team? Is there something I admire about them? Have I seen them as a parent, and I really admire that? And it always hits home with them. They're very open to receive feeling valued.
I think in navigating difficult topics, trying to help people receive feedback constructively, do you have any strategies for people who are listening or viewing, because this is definitely an area that leaders say, I know it's something that's got to be done, but some people feel like it's loading the dishwasher and it's not the most fun thing to do.
Well, here's been the biggest strength for me that I've learned from my mentors over the years is you have to know your people. I think that's the number one strategy. If you're going into that conversation from an artificial space, or you don't really know what they value or their why in what they're doing, it's difficult to navigate those conversations because they're not going to feel received. So I would say definitely one strategy is to know your people that you work with or who you're having that conversation with, and know your purpose. How does this connect or bring them back to where we're all one thing, one holistic thing?
Are there different strategies you would use with people you supervise versus maybe those who supervise you?
I'm much better with people I supervise, I'll tell you that. I think with people that I supervise, it's I've had many over the years. This is, 12 years I've been fortunate to be in this position. And some of those courageous conversations involved supporting people in growing where they were. Some of them involved growing them into a different parking lot that would be more suitable for them and give them that confidence that they needed. And some of them were really coaching them to a career that would be more aligned to their aspirations. I think that I feel more poised when I have those conversations with people that I supervise. I hold myself to a different level. With people that supervise me, I still kind of struggle with that, right? I struggle with being open to hearing and knowing, I really need to know why they're bringing that.
So is it fair to say maybe there have been times when you feel like you've resisted or struggled
Oh, absolutely.
To accept feedback in one of these conversations? And what shifted your perspective?
I think really just knowing I had to sit with it. I never have seen myself as a processor. I'm pretty impulsive and I rely a lot on gut instinct. But when I take the time to process and I look at the people that are bringing the message to me, I really have to dig deep to find out, are they looking at the best interest first of kids and then of me? And I always feel that the people that I've surrounded myself with that I trust have my best interest.
How do you manage your emotions when someone approaches you with challenging feedback or maybe challenges your decisions, something that's personal to you or your leadership style?
I'm not always great at that. I'm just going to tell you right now. I think that's a skill.
Honest.
That's a skill I'm always working on. I think, as you mentioned, I can get very passionate about things and I have strong opinions over time. So I always look at it like, I need to make sure they have all of the information, right? They may be giving me some advice or some counsel or having this courageous conversation for a purpose, but I feel it's always important to share the full context of what we're discussing. And then if I feel heard, I respond to that very differently. If they can validate what I'm saying, if they can, make a connection to things that I share with them, I find that I'm far more open to what they have to share with me about my own growth, about next steps, etc.
Do you feel like you're a person who has personal accountability?
100%.
Okay. How do you show that? Like maybe you've received some feedback from someone who is, in a different position than yours. Maybe someone who's even a supervisor.
Well, I think one thing is I'm constantly looking how I can hold myself accountable publicly. I think that's something that motivates me. So whether it's going into classrooms and doing observations and posting that publicly so people can see, when I set goals for myself, I've done a lot of reflection about where are those greatest areas of weakness that I can demonstrate more depth into. And so for me, I try to find ways to ensure that is public, that I have a thought partner in it that can hold me accountable, and that there's follow through to myself, right? And then of course, I celebrate myself. I think that's important. I think looking at where I started years ago and looking at myself now, not only in how I conduct myself, but how I process, how I think, how I'm not so impulsive to jump the gun with emotion, but to really listen to the feedback of others and see their perception. And I think when you're young and you're starting out, you really are like, I've got it, I know it, because you're so eager to show what you know. And as you get older, you're so much more eager to listen and to hear other people's perspectives and to see where that connection is with yourself.
So always the learner.
Always a learner.
Always the learner. So how do you think conversations, whether they're initiated by you or others, contribute to an organization's growth and development?
It's funny you bring that up. So right now I'm in the middle of this, temperature check with my staff, right? Because good leaders check on their people, right? And there's a lot going on right now. And so I've done some different informal check-ins with people. And then finally, I just put out a survey to see how people were feeling. And the one piece of data that came back that was a trend across the board with all of the team was they missed having opportunity to share and to have a conversation that was informal with me. And I thought, I did that really well a few years back, and I've not prioritized that. So now I see that that's a huge priority, and I'm having to check and adjust to make time for that. But hearing that was not something I anticipated. And so having to go back and replan the year and replan time to ensure that they get what they need is just one example of how we're constantly evolving as leaders. And sometimes we're hit with things that would not specifically be something we think that they need, and it's something they really need.
So when you do these check-ins with staff, how do you circle back so that they know they've been heard?
Well, in the conversations, we bring them in as a team, and some of it is formal and some of it's informal. But then it's just checking in with them daily. And I think for right now, what's most missing right now in the world is connection to each other. And I am kind of an introvert. Most people don't know that about me. They think
doesn't seem that way.
I'm a homebody. You can ask my husband. The less interaction, the better. And so I really have to put on my performance face when I'm out forward facing and make sure,
face.
and make sure people know that they're cared about. And that's sometimes pretty difficult. I'm much better in writing than I am face to face, but I would check back in with them, just making those personal connections. And so, I've realigned the calendar to make sure I have one-on-ones with people just to see how they're feeling, not to ask about data, not to ask about instruction, but just to ask about how they're doing as a human and what supports do they need to get through the day and how could I best support them. I think that a wise mentor I had years back told me the higher you go, the more humble you need to be. Mm-hmm. And that has always stuck with me. The more you show of who you are and the more you give of yourself, the more invested people feel in themselves and the more freedom they have to be themselves.
When you're learning things about yourself as a leader and you're talking a lot about reflection, which I think is a key thing that anyone listening who is a current leader or anyone thinking about assuming a leadership role needs to really take to heart. When do you do that reflection? Do you have a set time every day? Is there a routine you have? I'm just trying to get inside Claudette's head and think about that because I know I have my own routine about things.
Yeah, there is now. A lot of my reflection comes through music. Mm-hmm. I will tend to attach myself to a song and just being in the moment and being in that feeling. And it really helps me develop empathy. Using music. I generally will do it when I first get to work. I'll take the first 15 minutes for me. My door is shut. I put some music on. I think about what are the big charges of the day and how do I best approach people.
Sometimes grounding?
Yeah, very much so. And sometimes we don't go in feeling so great ourselves, right? And so it's so important before you catch an emotion with someone or you represent something that's maybe not your best interest to take those few minutes and ground yourself and reflect on, what happened yesterday, where do I want to go tomorrow, and where are we right now?
Yeah, my time is first thing in the morning. I try to be the first one up if I can. And, that first cup of coffee, if you're a coffee drinker like I am, before the world can mess with you, that moment, that's when I do my reading. That's when I do a lot of self-reflection. I found I'm a lot kinder to the rest of the world when I do that and get myself grounded, So I'm curious about that because I know everybody has their own rhythm to that. Are you listening to anything right now that you're attaching yourself to based on where you are in your current journey?
Yeah, right now.
As a musician, I have to know these things.
Right.
Yeah.
So to get prepared for this, my grounding, I was listening to the Police.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And just listening
I don't know what this is. But
just listening to some of the lyrics. And like I said, the importance of humanity and really our gifts. We believe so strongly that our gifts are our own, but at the end of the day, our gifts are truly ours to share. And so how do we humbly share those to support the development of others? And so I really look for deep lyrics. If I'm wanting some time to myself to reflect, to think of ideas, then you need to catch me at 3 a.m. At 3 a.m., I am up and on my computer, and Chris is usually dozing off next to me, and I'm fast and furious typing or looking up a book, analyzing a book, trying to figure out how that text applies to what we're doing. We just went to a big conference and came back with a bunch of books, and I can't wait to dig into those, not only for self-improvement, for just the excitement it brings to the team. And so my staff jokes because they know to shut their notifications off because those dings will be coming all night as I'm generating my thought. They know 3 a.m., here they come.
You can time that when you send it to people too.
I know,
right?
but I get too excited. I don't want to. Like, you have to know right now. Someone's up with me. I'm sure there's connection out there.
I can think of a few people you could probably call and they would be up that time of night. So let me just fire a couple things at you. Because we have courageous conversations, whether we're on the receiving end or whether we're on the giving end of that. Say somebody did something and, you're trying to do your best to understand all the facts that went on, but it has to be a courageous conversation because you have enough information to know that this is something that probably just shouldn't have happened. And maybe you're a little hot under the collar about that because, believe it or not, leaders have emotions too. What do you do with that if you're just really fired up?
Well, I take time for myself. I step away.
Before you talk to.
Before I talk to them. Usually I need a sweet treat. Make sure my sugar is in a good place because I don't need anything else messing with my already exasperated feelings. And then I go back to the place of how would I want to be treated. I generally will open those conversations with a question.
And when you can't make it work with someone and you know that it's just not a good marriage, so to speak, either with the culture of the organization or just, in terms of those personal dynamics with people, and you have to say goodbye. How do you handle those conversations? Those are hard.
Those are very difficult because it's often having to separate the person, right? A wise mentor once told me you can have a dynamic, amazing teacher, but they may not be the best employee. One particular example, there was an employee that I worked with that I tried very hard to support. I saw a lot of potential and opportunity there, but the person was very set in what they had been allowed to do. And to try to get them to reframe where we were going and what that job needed to look like, they struggled with, right? They got very comfortable. Had immense talent, maybe could have pulled it off, but had allowed their work ethic, in my opinion, to slip considerably. And to get them to understand where we were going and get beyond personal feelings. I worked a couple years at that, at trying to really support them, give them opportunities to shine, coach them, even remove barriers that could prevent them from growing into that role. And they didn't get there. And that was a difficult conversation. And I went to my mentor and said, I'm struggling. Like, this is a person who I think could achieve this. And we may not be able to replace easily. Has great community connection, has been here a long time. I really want this to work, but there is just something that is amiss and I can't coach them there. And my mentor said to me,
so you can't put in what God left out. Is
that's
that what
exactly what you said, being the mentor in that situation. and said, sometimes people just need to change and it's okay. It's okay. Like, the person will still be employed, but isn't the person for that position of where it's going. And I guess it always made me feel better about that. Nobody wants to put somebody on the streets or feel like they're, not giving them the opportunity to be their best. But there is a time and a place when it's not going to work. And being the person that has to make that decision is a difficult one. But as long as you check your gut and you're doing what's right for the kids.
Yeah, I think it's important to also know when you've done all you can do. Mm-hmm. That accountability. I asked you about personal accountability, but I kind of see it as a two-sided coin. One side is definitely all the supports for someone. As a leader, ethically and morally, we need to do that.
Absolutely.
We've hired these people. We've invested in them. I don't know about you, but anytime I've ever personally hired somebody, they're part of my family. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
And you bring them in and, a first-year person isn't going to perform like a fifth-year person, right? If a fifth-year person is still performing like a first-year person, we probably have a problem in my mind, based on whatever circumstances have gone on. But I just think it's the other side of the coin, too, that's really important, and that's their personal accountability. Mm-hmm. So one side's support, the other side's personal accountability. And you sometimes have to realize when to flip that coin. But it breaks my heart every time I've had to say goodbye to someone.
this is my big thing I'm stuck on this year that I reflect on every day is you may have someone who is good with kids, but are they good for kids? And I think there's a difference. And if you had asked me years ago, I would have never thought there was a difference. But as I'm growing as a leader, I'm starting to see that there is a fundamental difference in someone that is good with children versus for children, right? How are they planning for the long term? What is it they model? If they're rushing in last minute and they're disorganized, but then they do a phenomenal lesson, the kids are still rebounding from the effects of them coming in late, feeling rushed, that scattered feeling. So I have a benefit now of having an incredible team, absolutely amazing. The dream team, it's taken years to arrive. And this has been the year for me as a leader to really dig deep on that personal accountability part because I have to change as a leader. Right? I spent a lot of my years being cleanup of people that had been there before or things that needed to get done or developer, innovator, bringing new things in.
And opening a new school.
A new school. All of those things were great challenges that I feel like I thrived in and I loved. But now when you have this dynamic, incredible team, now that they've arrived, what do you do with them? How do you sustain them? And I think that's my bet at my next learning.
How do you grow them?
How do you grow them, right? When you have these top people, just sending them to see someone isn't necessarily going to grow them when there's not a lot of people at their level. And so I find myself, and I've been really honest with my staff this year about I'm having to change as a leader. And I need you guys to have some patience with me because this is new territory. You're going to see a softer side of me. You're going to see a side of me that shares my own growth and my own stories very openly with you. And for some of the people,
make yourself vulnerable,
completely vulnerable. And for some people that have been with me, they're like, "What is going on?" Like we're used to this and I'm like, "We've arrived. We have now arrived, and I need to work on keeping all of you and meeting you where you are and meeting your needs. And that's going to take a different part of me that I haven't yet grown into."
Yeah, because where people are in their career journey matters.
Yeah.
People just beginning, people mid-career, people about to retire, and what legacy do they want to leave? It's all very different depending on who you're working with, right?
Right.
So I have a couple more questions. One is, have you ever transferred any of these skills with courageous conversations outside of work?
Yes. I think being a parent, as your kids get older, you think it's going to get easier, right? You're looking forward to those nights of sleep. But when they move out and they're navigating the world on their own, those conversations can't look the same, right? They can't come from a place of because mom said. They have to come from a place of helping them to develop personal accountability, helping them to develop their own leadership, and ensuring, crossing your fingers, that the values that you've placed in there, that they'll carry on. So I find myself, it's funny because my kids, when they want to have these conversations, will say to me, one just said yesterday, "We're going to have an adult conversation." And I thought, I've got to switch modes here.
Oh, I switch modes all the time. I've got a daughter who plays the mom role with me.
Mine are trying. They're definitely trying. The middle one definitely does it a little smoother than the other two, but it's seeing them as people. And I think the leadership skills and the transfer of these skills helps me to navigate those from a less emotional place with my own children and even with my grandkids. Just really seeing them for who they are as people and the authenticity of what they're bringing to the table.
Good with kids, I guess, and good for kids. You mentioned that. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about our own kids right now. But tell me what you mean by someone who's good with kids, but not good for kids. Let's circle back to that.
Sometimes you can have a teacher who has an amazing right now impact. So right now in my own leadership journey, I'm really trying to chunk things into past, present, and future. That's, even in my daily interactions with people, is this a message that is resounding from my past? Is this a message that I'm supposed to hear right now? Or is this a message that's going to carry me into the future and have me, develop forward thinking around a concept? And so, circling back, in watching teachers teach, they may be really great right now in the present. But are the skills that they're developing in kids going to be transferable to future careers? Are they just showing up and teaching the kids and giving their whole heart in the moment? But when they leave, are they really thinking about the kids when they leave and about how everything that they do drives that future, right? So in Westminster, we say the most important day is the day after graduation. And I think, especially when you have this top tier team, how do you get them thinking about not the now with the kid, but the future of the kid, and how are we best preparing them? One example we have is we have some dynamic arts kids, and they look for arts opportunities outside of our district. And one example we have is we have a kiddo who just came back, lasted less than 2 months at a school that had her specific training in place, and she was prepared academically, but not prepared socially or culturally, and didn't last more than 2 months. And so I have to reflect on her journey with the people that did most of that preparation to say, did we do our best, not in working with her, but being good for her long term, for her outcome, for all of those skills that she would need to be able to be successful outside of the here and the now and our environment.
Raising good humans along with good academic
and resilience
kids. Yeah.
I think that was something we definitely had a miss on.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, if you could offer advice to anyone listening or watching about either initiating or participating or receiving courageous conversations, what would that advice be?
I would first say be authentic. Know your people. Find out where they're coming from and try to meet them there. And ultimately, if it doesn't work, don't be afraid to have that courageous conversation, helping them to go to where they're going to be at their best, because it's not always where they land.
Yeah, separation of employment. Sometimes it's better for everybody.
Sometimes it's better for everybody. And I've actually had a couple people come back and where we had that separation of employment and send me thank you cards, which I thought was the most bizarre thing at the time, but they couldn't see it when they were going through it. But being on the other side, they're so much more happy. It's a step that they wouldn't have necessarily taken without that courageous conversation. And they wanted to make sure they circled back to let me know that they appreciated my ability to coach them through that difficult conversation so they could navigate to where they were supposed to be.
All of us are issued just a certain number of heartbeats, and so everyone deserves an opportunity to be in the right place, doing
Absolutely.
the right stuff, right?
Yep.
Okay. Well, Claudette, I really appreciate you being with us today. This has been fantastic and fun. I hope for you too.
So fun.
And I just wish you well. You're a superstar. I hold you in high regard. You're doing amazing things, and keep doing them for all the children. Thank you very much.
Well, and thank you for being the leader that I look up to.
I want to thank everybody who either watched or listened today. Spending your time, spending your heartbeats with us is an honor and a privilege, and I hope you'll tune in for the next episode as well. Thank you.